Get ready to take a flamethrower to the official narrative and learn what the elites don't want you to know. You're listening to The Tom Woods Show.
Hey everybody, Tom Woods here. It's episode 2555 of The Tom Woods Show, and I'm very glad to have with me once again Clifton Duncan, whose story you have heard me tell numerous times, whom I saw on Broadway back in probably, I'd like to say 2018, a couple of times with my family before I ever realized I'd get to know him in real life. He had the most elite acting training you could ask for, had a successful career, but of course COVID came along and they demanded the shots, and he said, don't want them, don't need them. And that meant a lot of difficulties for Clifton, but he's an extremely important voice. He's a great podcaster. He's working on a project of the utmost importance, and I'm really happy to be able to welcome him back. So Clifton, welcome back.
Tom, it's great to see you again at 2555, and it's the third time that I'm on, so it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, I think that makes you more than 0.1%, like of all the guests that I've had. So I'm really glad to be able to talk to you. And also, it has been kind of a long time, and I do want to catch up with you a little bit. I told my audience about your project. I sent it to my email newsletter that you, in fact, you know what? I'm going to let you talk about it. Tell them what the project is, and then, where things stand, interesting things you've dug up, whatever.
Yeah, well, sure. I guess I'll do the spiel. Back in 1977, a wonderful actor named James Earl Jones did a play called Robeson about the actor and activist Paul Robeson, which I learned also was performed by Avery Brooks, who people might know from shows like, I want to say Hunting Hawk and Star Trek Deep Space Nine. Or maybe it was Voyager, I forget which one. Then later on, 2014, 10 years ago, the great Lawrence Fishburne did a play called Thurgood, which you can watch on Amazon Prime right now, as a matter of fact, about Thurgood Marshall. And long story short, I said to myself, I had this idea kicking around in my head for a while. I said, what one-man show could I do? Who could I write a show about that would be kind of interesting? And the name Thomas Sowell popped up into my head. And thanks to the good graces and the pushing by Mr. Woods here, I was able to piece together an Indiegogo crowdfunding campaign. And it was funny because initially, in our private correspondence, Tom was like, well, I helped out a friend who wanted to write a book, and he ended up raising $40,000. So I don't know if you'll get that much, but we'll see. And
right.
So over the course of a couple of months, I ended up raising over $140,000. I had no idea. We got over 953 backers, I want to say. And, it was a runaway success. And so now I'm deep in the rehearsal and development stage. I gave myself a really ambitious deadline of 6 months to have a draft out. But the fact of the matter is it was too ambitious, and I'm still... I don't feel like I understand him enough yet. I'm treating it as a character study. I've read his memoir twice. I've got his book of letters as well, which give really, really great insight into, I want to understand the psychology of the man. I don't feel as though I understand his voice quite yet. And the more I read, the more I want to explore. I just picked up a copy of his book, Knowledge and Decisions, which was published in 1980, and he considers it one of his most important works alongside A Conflict of Visions and Conquests and Cultures, I want to say. Matter of fact, as we sit here, I have my copy of his memoir all noted up with all kinds of interesting quotes. So as far as where I am right now, it's interesting. I actually went away from it for a few weeks because I don't know what triggered it, Tom, but I sank into this really bad depression for about a month. And, maybe it's oversharing with your audience, but I spent about a month getting as stoned and drunk as I could. And I didn't do anything. And then I was getting called all over the place. And I was trying to have all these other obligations and doing these other things in the background. but I bounced back since then. I'm back on the ball, and I'm reading a lot lately. I just picked up a copy of the Iliad the other day, and I just started out Plato's Republic last night, and Knowledge and Decisions. So, I feel like my head's going to explode at some point with all of the ideas. But, the more I explore, the more, I want to find out. Sowell's whole thing was about, initially about the history of ideas, specifically the history of economic ideas. And, from Marx and Hegel and the French economists and so on and so forth. So, it really is a matter of wanting to explore as much of his work as possible. I had a teacher who once said that information is inspiration, and my intuitiveness tells me that the story and what I want to say about him and the kind of statement that I want to make with the piece will materialize. I will say that I think setting the piece in the 1960s. Is the most dramatically pregnant period because he begins the decade. He's a young 30-something man. He's a newly married man. He's trying to get his academic career together, and he has no experience, and he's trying to figure out what he wants to do, really. But then by the end of the decade, he has a massive shift ideologically. He ends up going through a pretty rough divorce. He ends up tiring of academia, and over the course of that time period, obviously, the first half of the 60s, he's building up his career. The second half, he's dealing with the initiation and then the fallout of the civil rights movement. And what is fascinating there is that he's not only doing he begins the decade as more of a Marxist radical, and he's on the side of the activists. But by the time the decade is over, I won't say he's on a 180, but he's definitely changing his position. But then this also reflects shift in his own personal life and his professional life. And so basically, when you're crafting any sort of dramatic piece, you want your character to go through hell, and you want to put them through hell. And the 60s is perfect because he's still young and very virile, and he has a lot to offer. And there's so much that happens in that one decade. And of course, you don't have to stick to just one particular time period. You can always do flashbacks and flashing forward and these kinds of things to fill in information. But what I don't want the piece to be is a straight up biography play, because you can just go and read his memoirs for that. And what's interesting about the theater is that it's a very language driven medium, and you can debate ideas there. And it's funny because the more I dwell on it, the more I feel like it would be more in the spirit of Sowell to not just have the piece be about one sort of idea or ideological vision, social vision as you might call them, but rather a conflict of visions. And of course, the key to all great drama is conflict. So there's a lot of great ways to go, and there's a lot of meat there. It's just a matter of making the right dramaturgical choices to figure out what the best and most powerful story is. And then we're going to tour the thing and introduce it to the country and then upload it online for all to see. And I don't know what it's going to be. I had another teacher who once told me that everything eventually collapses into place. But whatever it's going to be, I know I'm going to smash it, and I'm going to kill it, and it's going to be great, and people are really going to be excited about it. So I look forward to, definitely.
Well, given what a relatively young man you are, I assume this will be the first project that you yourself have written that you're taking to the stage. That's got to be right.
Well, it's interesting because in my grad school days, conservatory days, I actually, so it's a 3-year program at NYU's graduate acting program, which is a subsidiary of the Tisch School. And in our final year there, they have a unit called Free Play, and that's where the students, I guess you could sort of call it our version of a dissertation or a thesis or whatever you want to call it. And they provide students with space and time to create whatever they want. So I had one classmate who wrote an entire musical, which is kind of awesome. I had another classmate who wrote a one-act play and that I was in. And I decided I was going to write a one-man show that was very autobiographical and very hip-hop based. So I was so the concept was that I was the sort of one-man DJ in a way. So I was cutting and scratching into and out of characters. I was rapping, I was singing, and transforming into all these different people, and weaving in and out of monologues. And that's actually how I got my first agent before I even graduated from the program. After one of the shows, one of my teachers brought her husband's agent, and happened to be a wonderful boutique agency. And afterward, he was like, "Here's our card. We'd love to hear from you if you'd like." So, and then that show ended up, I ended up doing it at the Chautauqua Institution, I think the following year. And then I did it at the Ars Nova Festival in New York City, maybe the same year or the year after that. So it's funny because people have been asking me, "Hey, man, when are you going to write another one?" And I was like, "Well, when I have something to say, I will." And this one kind of really fell into my lap. So it's not my first rodeo, so to speak, but in terms of the sort of enormity and the stakes of the project, definitely this is a new arena. And on top of all of that, all kinds of other concerns go into it in terms of marketing and production planning and networking and these kinds of things that I feel like I'll cross that bridge when I get to it. And I've already built up a huge network. And what's also fascinating is that Tom Sowell actually has a lot of fans in the entertainment industry, which I'm very surprised to learn. A couple of prominent actors have spoken to me and said, "Hey, he's a big hero of mine." There's a great director who reached out to me on Facebook just a week ago. And she said, "Hey, Tom Sowell's a hero of mine, and I've been following your Substack and yada yada yada." So there's some decently based people, and you'd be pretty. One of them is a Tony-winning composer. I'll tell you about it when we get off air. I don't want to pull him out of the closet involuntarily. So very surprising people are big fans of Tom Sowell. So I think there's a lot of support, not just within or without outside the industry, but also within it, which is interesting. So we'll see how it all pans out.
Hey everybody, let's take a minute to thank our sponsor, Persist SEO. If you are getting buried by your competition online, then build your brand, your reputation, and your lead flow with digital marketing by Persist SEO. If you are a small local business trying to compete against large companies in the service industry, then increase your visibility with Persist SEO. Or what if you have low or no leads coming in on a consistent basis? Well, then website search engine and conversion optimization can help move the needle to a more prosperous business model for you. Are you tired of cold calling and networking, meeting places getting shut down? Use your website as a lead generation engine. Or what if you're not showing up for your services in the search engines? Well, get found with Persist SEO's expert search engine optimization. All you have to do is call 770-580-3736 or visit them at ineedseo.help for a free website audit and consultation. That's 770-580-3736 or ineedseo.help. I can't wait to see what you come up with. You mentioned that month period, and you were saying maybe you're sharing too much, but in a way, I was anticipating something like that because the question I wanted to ask you, and before we recorded, I made this odd comment about, is anything off limits? And this is what I was driving at. I mean, I'm a booster and a well-wisher of yours, but I am not entitled to the answer to this question. So you can just kick this right back. But you went through a period where you had to come to terms with basically having your identity taken from you. Everything that you had worked for and everywhere you expected your life to go was suddenly yanked away. And that must have taken you to some pretty dark places. I mean, it must have been a kind of grief, a kind of mourning. And so I guess I wanted to just ask you, how are you today in terms of that?
Well, there was certainly a period where I was speaking to a friend on the phone, and I said, it really is a good thing that I'm a supporter of the Second Amendment, but it's probably a good thing I didn't own a gun at that point. I reached a point where, and a lot of my artist friends actually have gone through a similar thing, who were sort of cast out by the craziness of 2020 through 2023. And, and I reached a point where I reached a couple of crossroads. One, I mean, I appreciate you referring to me as a young man. I'm more of a young-ish man. I can't really claim that anymore.
You have a very youthful look.
There we go. We'll stick with that. It's the filters on the camera. But yeah, a few things happened for me. One, I just got very angry because I said, I just refuse to let these ridiculous, stupid people rob me of something that I feel like I was destined for. And I've said before that, like I was on John McWhorter's show, and I said, ever since I began acting, not one person. I mean, usually when you become an actor, and even my grandmother did this, right? They say, "Do you have a plan B?" Or like, you'll never make it, or what's going on. And I had the opposite effect. So in this era where we're so obsessed with race, and you have all these social justice warriors talking about how they don't feel seen, they want to be represented. I mean, I was supported from day one by all kinds of people, from my classmates to my faculty members to industry professionals. And I said, people believed in me more than I believed in myself. And lately, I've been revisiting, I don't know if you see me posting about, like James Earl Jones doing Shakespeare, and watching, just revisiting Shakespeare and the old acting books, theory books, treatises, and saying to myself, you know what, man, this is, or for better or worse, this is what, I have a lot to offer, and I still feel like I have a lot of work to do. I still feel like I haven't done my best work yet, and I refuse to let these people hold me back. At the same time, especially after October 7th, which today is the anniversary of, I saw across the ideological spectrum, people just lose their minds. And that began my kind of break from, I began at that point to be really resentful of being sort of lumped in. And it's understandable because I was a very harsh critic of pandemic policy as well. I've been a very harsh critic of left-wing identity politics. But what I never wanted to be was someone who just talked about, the arts all the time, and not someone who never produced anything. And I became I still am very irritated by the fact that there's a lot of people sort of in this space who they have this wonderful mechanism, right? This great opportunity in terms of alternative and new media, but they'll dump tons of money into a cinematographer for their podcast, but they're not commissioning new work, by new writers. They're not founding new theaters. They're not creating any kind of culture yet. They're calling themselves culture warriors. And I said, I don't want to be another talking head. I refuse to be, and plus, really, it's not really my tribe. I didn't put myself into a crippling student debt and sacrificed all these years just to be a fucking tweeter and a podcaster. That's not what I set out to do. And I'm capable of far more than that. And so the Sowell Project is kind of part of that in terms of creating culture and making an impact. But, back to your question is, so right now I'm very angry and feel very driven, and cleaning up the various aspects of my life that were lagging behind. And now I'm kind of bursting at the seams and wanting to get things done and wanting to move forward in a really big way. And so the depression and the destitution is sort of converted into more of maybe a righteous anger, and wanting to say, you know what, you people who both, you who decided to purge. I use the term niggerize, frankly, because that's the correct term for what they did to people who didn't take the shot. On one side, but on the other side, it's like, you have all these other people who just don't. They have no real appreciation for art and culture, and then they wonder why they make no impact in the broader culture. And me, I got my friends over in Nashville and other places that are doing the same thing, who are saying, we have to build something new. We have to build stuff. We can't just sit around bitching and complaining like we licked our wounds, right? We all got sort of cast out of heaven, so to speak. And now people are making some really big moves and trying to build something new. And that's where I'm at right now. It's building the Sowell project. It's building my online following, and other things which I don't want to talk about right now. But so now I'm in a place where it's like, look, man, half my life is over. And maybe it's a midlife crisis, but it's also just feeling like, look, I had 4 or 5 years, not to victimize myself, but stolen, and that's just that's not cool. And I on one hand, it's sort of nice because I see the industry. They're sort of like, oh my God, why is no one coming to our shows? Why is no one coming to our movies? And I was like, well, you should listen to people like me instead of blackballing them. But that's what happens. So a little bit of Schadenfreude going on, but I'm on my own path right now, and maybe I'll forge some, make a little history or do something new and unique, which no one's seen before. But we'll see what happens.
I recently sent out to my email newsletter subscribers the video of you singing "This Nearly Was Mine." Now, when I first was exposed to you, you were in a play that was not a musical. So at that time, I didn't even know you had a singing voice. So this was a whole new dimension when you started posting things like this on Twitter. This is another side of you I hadn't been aware of. And I want to ask you a really dumb guy question, but that I've always been curious about. As a non-singer, were you born with that beautiful voice? Was it cultivated? Did you train for it? Or is it a combination of all those things?
It's a combination. I really, really, really am lucky because I didn't even know that I could sing until my sophomore year of college. And I think it was in an acting class, and I did the song called Honeysuckle Rose from Ain't Misbehavin', and rest in peace, Ken Page. He just passed away. He did that song. On the cast recording, you can hear it. And it was like, oh, I can carry a tune. And then I think we did Hair the next year. And it was funny because that was my first taste of equity, which is when, I kept getting into all these other shows, right? And then the faculty refused to cast me again in like another lead. And so they were like, because someone else has to have a chance.
Oh,
yeah,
no.
I know. But it was funny because one time, at one point, one of the actors dropped out, and there's a wonderful duet in that musical called "What a Piece of Work Is Man," based on the text from Hamlet, and it's just a gorgeous duet between two people. And one of the actors had dropped out, or he had like to take the performance off or something, and I stepped in, and the director was like, "Man, you sing that song a hell of a lot better than the other guy." And then I got out of my first professional job was at a theater called the Barksdale Theater in Richmond, Virginia, and it was a musical called Where's Charlie? And I had to do this British accent, and it was I think it's a Frank Lesser musical who also wrote Guys and Dolls. And then right after that, I booked a play in D.C., another musical, a pop musical set during the Vietnam War. And at that point, I knew that I could sing. I had a lot of power in my voice, and I had a good amount of range and versatility, but I didn't have any real technique or control. Then in grad school, we had a class we had a singing class, and you had to take it whether you could sing or not. And so the motto was that everyone cries in singing class, which is true. Everyone did cry in singing class because it's a very, very vulnerable thing to sing in front of people. I was able to expand my upper register in that class. I found like I had this crazy, sort of thing. And then after a while, I got out of school. When I was out of school, and I was still working as an actor and doing musicals, and I decided, this is a lesson in economics in a way. I decided to, I said, let me actually pay and spend the money and get some coaching and work on this and cultivate it. And then once I began to do that, then my income increased, and my career began to expand and grow. And I became one of these up and coming singing actors in New York, and working with Tony-winning directors and across from Tony-winning stars. And it was just sort of insane. And so what happened was I started out being very inspired by these Broadway baritones, right? These classic leading men like Alfred Drake, John Raitt, later on Brian Stokes Mitchell, who I had the pleasure of meeting a couple of times. And then I turned into what's called a musical theater baritone, which is someone who has some good low notes and also some high notes. And then I had to do this play called Carmen Jones, which is an adaptation of Georges Bizet's opera Carmen, based on the novel of the same name. And within a few weeks, I had to transform myself into an operatic tenor, which sparked my love of opera, which lasts to this day. So, I say that my voice makes no sense. When people hear me speak, they say, "Oh, well, clearly you're going on the bass line." But then I, start popping out G's and A's above the staff, and then there's my pop repertoire, which has an R&B, which is a whole different kind of bag, a new voice that I'm exploring. So it's one of those things where I probably love singing more than anything else. Music is probably my first love, more so than acting, and I just am really, really lucky, especially since if you're in New York, if you're able to sing, you can make a lot more money than if you're just an actor. So it's really been interesting, and again, I don't know where it comes from, but it's there.
I've had a number of musicians on this podcast, and I always want to know who their influences were. Who moved them and made them get into music. And I wonder, I've never asked this of an actor. How about influences of yours that made you stand up and take notice?
You mean just for straight acting or singing? Or anything?
How about either one?
Well, it's funny that this morning I was actually in tears because I was listening to watching a video of, you can go on YouTube and find it, but it's a video of Whitney Houston at 19 years old on Merv Griffin's show. And she's singing a song called Home from The Wiz. And, Whitney is just, I'm getting emotional thinking about it. She was so extraordinary and really perfect. And it wasn't just that she had these big notes. It was her control and her poise and her grace. She had so much power in the quiet moments as well. And she was a great storyteller. That's why she was a wonderful actress as well as a singer. And that's why she had something that no other singer had. But in terms of vocals, she is a big influence. Luther Vandross, people remember him. I love him. Donny Hathaway, a very underrated and unsung singer. As far as acting goes, I feel it's kind of cliche, and my tastes have changed. But Denzel Washington obviously is sort of a torchbearer for a lot of us, especially if you happen to be a Black person. But other influences include Sir Laurence Olivier. He is one of perhaps the most celebrated actor of the 20th century, and which is interesting because then in our conservatory training he was kind of frowned upon, and I think it was because he sort of had this bravura, over the top style of acting. But later in his career, you see films like Marathon Man with Dustin Hoffman, or The Entertainer was really good. The Entertainer, where he has a wonderfully naturalistic presence on camera. Again, I mentioned in the theater guys like John Raitt and Alfred Drake. Richard Kiley is another one. Who played Man of La Mancha. Brian Stokes Mitchell is another one. And then but it's funny because a lot of my screen idols are men. So it's guys like De Niro, Dustin Hoffman, Gene Hackman is fantastic. I love him. Clint Eastwood, Morgan Freeman. But in the theater, it's really the divas, right? It's Audra McDonald, Bernadette Peters. Probably those two are my biggest influences.
All right, folks, let's you and I talk. We both know there is no chance of getting the truth about what's going on in the world by watching CNN or any mainstream outlet. We know that. We know that even the headlines in the news are propaganda, even the headlines. But those headlines become tomorrow's history. So what is the chance that you're going to get a reliable overview of American history through a mainstream source? About as much chance as you have getting the news from CNN. So that's why old Woods here is giving you 2 free big courses in U.S. history. Absolutely free. Don't cost you nothing. And we're going through the colonial period all the way up through the end of the 20th century. And it's revisionist in the best sense, that it takes the standard narrative and it smashes it into pieces. We open up your head. We dig out anything that was put there by people who hate you. We replace it with the truth. Then we close your head back up. That's what happens with my U.S. history courses. And you get them for free. Doesn't cost you a cent. So for yourself, for younger people in your family, to take a long drive and make it worthwhile intellectually. You can listen to them anytime, anywhere. Head over to woodshistory.com and get them. woodshistory.com. I saw her in Hello, Dolly, but I mean, she was well into her career by then on Broadway.
Yeah, I'm sure it was great. And one of the first cast recordings I'd heard was her doing Gypsy. And of course, all the jaded New Yorkers were like, oh, she's not right for the part. But I loved her little sort of her, she has such a unique voice and instrument. And she's got a lot of power in that voice, and an extraordinary actress, and just wonderful storyteller again. So, it's hard to pin down any sort of singular influence, but I've had a lot of influences over the course of my career.
You had a tweet. Everybody should be following you. Well, is it just? Yeah, it's at Clifton A. Duncan on X or Twitter. But you had a tweet this very week on or less than a week ago about In Living Color, the sketch comedy show. And it was a very favorable tweet about that, saying that this was a show that, got away with everything and everybody loved it, and that today we wouldn't be able to have. First of all, can you comment on In Living Color? Then secondly, given that today we are a bit, we are suffering under disabilities that are self-imposed, what nevertheless do you think are some of the high points, maybe in television or in any medium?
Well, the thing that made In Living Color special to me, for one, it was funny because my mother did not want me to watch it, so I'd have to go to my friend's house and watch it. It was considered so edgy at the time, and really, it sort of is an indicator of just how much more, perhaps maybe conservative is the right word, that our culture was back then. But even then, I mean, there were certain characters that would just, they would be tarred and feathered today. They tried to do it. One, Damon Wayans had a character called Handyman, which was literally a handicapped, disabled superhero. Jim Carrey had a character called Venus de Milo, which, really, like, the trans activists would just destroy them today if they tried that. Damon Wayans and David Alan Grier had this duo, these recurring characters called, or a recurring sketch called Men on Film, which was these two gay guys, and the whole sketch was them reviewing movies and with all these sexual innuendos. And, so it's all these different kinds of sketches, and they pulled no punches. It was very daring and bold for the time. I think a lot of those sketches, maybe they haven't all aged well, but just in terms of their sheer audaciousness and what I love about that show was that it was, today it would be referred to as sort of unapologetically black, so to speak, is whatever that means. But I think that is sort of reductive in terms of its influence and appeal, because I think it had this sort of hip hop influence. Before each commercial break, right? They had the Fly Girls. One of them was Jennifer Lopez, and they would be dancing to popular songs of the day. The aesthetic was very hip hop, and the show was just had this own sort of edge to it. And I think that kind of authenticity and rawness was really fantastic. On top of that, the casting. It was a majority black cast, but there was not one weak link in that cast. And I think that the vision of Keenan Ivory Wayans, who, is a wonderful actor, producer, and writer, especially in the 80s, with films like Hollywood Shuffle and I'm Gonna Get You Sucker, which everyone has to see. Just a hilarious spoof of blaxploitation films from the 1970s. Fox at that time was trying to be the sort of upstart, new, bold, edgy, young network. And I think that show just really exemplified what happens when you allow, when you're not worried so much about offending everyone, and you're not worried about safety and about harming people, and you just let it kind of rip and let people speak in their own voices. And, I had a friend text me last night, said, I was watching these old episodes, and, there's no way they can get away with any of this today. And part of the problem now is that, I think it was Mark Andreessen today had a tweet about AI, talking about how woke millennials have this sort of culture now, which is safe and harmless. And that's like, they're two biggest values. And to me, that describes a lot of what's happened in entertainment. Is it's so safe and it's harmless. Someone tweeted the other day about how the top 10 films of this year, 2024, they're all sequels or reboots or spinoffs of existing IPs. And so on top of the fact that you have all these popular IPs that have been hijacked, right, by these activists who are posing as writers, and they're not very good, you have this sort of regurgitation of things that have already worked, and they're being redone by people who don't have the ability to bring something new to the table. So there's standout shows like Shogun, here and there, but right now it feels to me like the East Asians are really killing it in terms of popular entertainment. Their music is popular, their films are popular, even their comic books are outselling American comics. And so, it's you don't want to go sort of the sort of conservative doomer route of, we're a culture in decline and everything's collapsing. But I think it is an indicator. It's not just crumbling infrastructure. It's not just an economic malaise. It's not just a increasingly factious populace. It's not just a decline in education or the quality of education. It's look at the kind of art and entertainment that we used to put out and how powerful that was, and how our stars, our actors and musicians and athletes really had a global impact. And now it's just kind of lame. And I think everyone can feel it, even if they can't quite put their hands on it. And I think it's sort of if we look at art and entertainment and culture as a barometer of the psyche or the collective spirit or even the soul of a nation, then I think we all kind of feel that something is sort of missing and hollow in a lot of ways, and that's reflected in the quality of our entertainment right now.
Well, you've talked about how many artists are just contemptuous of a major segment of their audience, and it's, first of all, that's made me wonder: were they always that way, but they were more subtle, and I just didn't notice, or has something changed?
Here's what I think what happened. I mean, just the other day, right? So we had the sequel to The Joker came out, and it's being panned across the board. And there's speculation that the film. I never understood the reaction to the first film. I mean, I enjoyed the first film.
I did too. So I was excited about the sequel.
Right. But the thing is, when I spoke to other entertainment people at the time that it came out, they were very, very hostile towards it, or very awkward about it. And then you go back and you read, and I think it's because the idea, the sort of meme arose that the film was sort of, calling out to, the alt-right or something, or some kind of far-right sensibility, as opposed to, an actual, like a sympathetic story about how we overlook people at the bottom of our society, who people who really need help and who are struggling. And so the idea was that the wrong people, so to speak, enjoyed the film. And so they had to say, you know what, F these people, and kick them in the teeth with a musical sequel starring Lady Gaga. And my theory about that is that it wasn't always this way. And just like with other institutions and industries, academia, I think, has had a very corrosive impact. Because what happened, I think, is that 50 years ago, if you wanted to be in the theater or in Hollywood, there were some programs, you might go to UCLA for screenwriting, or if you wanted to be an actor, Yale, NYU, Juilliard were like the top 3 conservatories. But, those really didn't come into the fore until about 20, 30 years ago. But it was like, you had to, you would, the thing was you had to have passion and drive, and you probably came from like, a poor or working class background. Guys like Laurence Olivier, Cary Grant, Denzel Washington, even Will Smith, had a middle class background, working class background. And we had writers like Arthur Miller, August Wilson, and others who, again, came from either poor or working class backgrounds. And what happened, the shift that occurred, was that college and university became a gateway or a pipeline into the industry. So each year now, you have this new crop of freshly minted BFA and MFA students in a range of majors, from lighting design to acting to directing to stage management, or they go into programs where they learn how to be administrators for different theaters. And I think what's happened is that now, because the university has become a reflection of a mostly white, affluent, quote unquote progressive or maybe radical left vision, now that's what the entertainment industry looks like. Now the entertainment industry and our various cultural institutions have become reflections of that very same social vision. And that same contempt, that same sort of disdain for, quote unquote, flyover country or red America is now translated through the work that we see, the entertainment that we see. Whereas before, again, as I said, it was, if you wanted to learn how to be an actor or a dancer, you had a regular job and you took classes at a specialized studio, the actor's studio or some random conservatory. It was like something you did on the side. Or you volunteered at a theater, you swept floors, or you had an internship or something. You worked your way up from the bottom, from the mailroom or whatever. You were a PA, like you had to have a drive and a passion for it. And I think it was a much more inclusive industry, ironically, back then, in a way, as far as class is concerned and politics are concerned. But now it's become, I think as a result, it's become a bourgeois profession. It's really moved away from, or bourgeois profession. It's moved away from the sort of liberal kind of nature that it had before. And again, it was always left, right? It was always going to be left, probably will always be more left-leaning, but not the way that it is right now. And, I think at a time where where people have a plethora of options for entertainment, to choose from, be it podcasts or streamers or YouTubers or video games, which have really arisen as a very powerful storytelling medium in the past 10 years. People are saying, you know what, you can hate me all you want. I'm going to go over here. Even the streaming bubble has collapsed. You know what I mean? And what's interesting is that you see the same thing reflected in comic books, for instance, where people are watching old shows. They're watching older shows now, and more than they are the new ones. And so they're not only competing with all these other, I guess modern entertainment is not only competing with all these other media, right? They're also competing with older, superior drama. So it's not just that there's a competency crisis in an industry that now selects for conformity and compliance along political lines. It's also, as opposed to experience and excellence. But it's also, they're having a relevancy crisis because they're disconnected from the broader audience. And I think America happens to be more moderate or conservative than the industry wants to admit. And until they understand that and accept that, they're going to go the way of the opera, really, where it's going to become like a luxury toy for very rich people. And I don't think they want that.
Yeah, no, definitely not. Now, I still do. I feel like I'm in confession, and you're the priest, but I still do go to the occasional Broadway show. And so I will tell you that very shortly after you wrote a piece or a series of pieces on your Substack, which I subscribe to, by the way, talking about the collapse of theater and pointing out that it's not all forms of mass entertainment that are having this problem. It's very specifically this. I went to see Chicago because I had never seen it and it's been running forever. And by the way, I don't find that an enjoyable show. I don't understand what people see in it.
Interesting.
I thought the plot was stupid. I thought the score had no showstoppers in it. But anyway, it doesn't matter. Like I'm just an amateur. But they had on all the seats a little questionnaire. How many shows have you come to this year? How does that compare to how many you went to the previous year? What's the reason for the disparity? And I thought, this is Clifton Duncan's theory right here. Like they're desperately trying to figure out what they can do now.
Well, and again, they'll never figure it out, and I'll tell you why. They have made a practice out of preaching to the choir, and because there were other theaters that were sending out surveys via email, like what do you want to watch? And I'm thinking to myself, why don't you talk to the ticket taker, or the person sitting behind the glass at the subway, booth? Why don't you talk to the people who run the bodegas that you go to on the corner? Why don't you speak to the people picking up trash in Times Square, or the custodians who work in your buildings and maintain the grounds? What do they want to watch? What are they concerned about? And I have to tell you, I'm sorry, but it's not trans rights and women's suffrage. They don't want to be lectured to about race. And, I once joked that you can find far more diversity and variety among 12 line cooks than you will amongst 1,000 progressives. And it's kind of true, but because they have this disdain or sort of, I think, this romantic vision of the poor or whatever, and they're sort of absorbed with this idea of themselves as activists, and it's just, I don't think that they really, I don't think that they have the true awareness of the temperature of the country. I mean, a prime example. I'm sure you saw, some months ago there were these articles floating around, this data floating around that young men are swinging more conservative, and while women are swinging further to the left. At the same time, I saw, I have to look into it more, but there's also, people were saying that more people are going into trades as opposed to going to college. And I'm thinking to myself, is there anyone in the entertainment industry now who is looking at these cultural trends and saying to themselves, maybe we should commission more work from a more blue collar perspective? Maybe we can bust out more of the Greek classics or Shakespeare, because conservatives love the classics. They're big on tradition. And, maybe you can alter your programming and reach out that way, but at the same time, it might be a pretty big ask because you spent the last decade at least calling them all Nazis and fascists. So I don't know if they're going to really come back anytime soon. And again, I'm working on this long essay. It's taken me forever, but it's been in my head forever about how the pendulum is never going to swing back. And that now, I sense that a lot of entertainment professionals are sort of living in this realm, this sort of blithely oblivious realm where, sure, it's bad now, but it'll bounce back eventually. And I just don't think it's going to happen. I think this is the new normal that they wanted, and that they didn't know that they were striving for. And, it's not just economic, it's also a relevancy crisis, as I said before. And they can't bring themselves to really reach out to the broader American perspective. And, they don't seem to understand that America is not just a place that's a multicultural or multiracial republic. It's also one that has a lot of different views and opinions. And if you don't understand that, and you can't, how are you going to connect to a broader audience? And what's really tragic and what frustrates me is that, just the other day, I posted a clip of James Earl Jones doing King Lear back in 1974 in Central Park. And people were so blown away by it because they had no idea, that Jones was actually the real deal, as far as acting is concerned. And I mean, and he blows it out of the water in terms of his Shakespearean acumen. But people love it so much. It's like when I post Rodgers and Hammerstein, myself singing that, they love it. So there's a huge untapped market. It's not that people lack the sophistication and the cultivation to enjoy these things. It's just that there's a presumption that they're just too stupid to get it, and they call everyone again, Nazis. So the tragedy for me is that I think that art and the arts are one of the few realms that you can really bring people together. And I think, for my tastes, the most sophisticated thinkers right now, the people who are thinking in the long term, in the highest plane, are those who are saying, like, look, we have to focus on art as well. It's not enough to be an economic superpower. It's not enough to be just have to have military might, or technological prowess. There's a different element there, that is missing still. And until we realize that, art can bring people together from all walks of life and get people talking, then you can complain about the cultural divide all you want. You can complain about how, we're balkanizing all you want. But if you're not creating culture, then I think you're not really a part of the solution. And on one hand, you have the arts who are controlled by people who, again, you see what they've done with it. And on the other hand, as we were saying before, we have this whole new media space where people can create something new, and all they're doing is podcasting. No offense, I have one too, but
Yeah.
But they're not creating anything. Sure, we could say like maybe Daily Wire or something, but I think they're sort of the same problem from the other end of the spectrum, where it's only going to appeal. It's ideologically driven work that's only going to appeal to a certain sect of society. I think Angel Studios is pretty great, making interesting stuff, but you need you just need to create stuff that can appeal to a broader perspective, and we've done it before. We can like I said before, we had our Arthur Millers and our August Wilsons, and we can do it. We just need to have people on one side, and Camille Paglia's been on this for a long time. Camille Paglia, who is conservatives particularly, need to embrace the arts more and understand it more. And it's again, the artists themselves aren't helping. They're pushing everyone away. But and for me, what I've learned, I've been so heartened by, is that it's not for lack of sophistication, or it's really just interest and reaching out to them. And once they see greatness, be it through a James Earl Jones or Rodgers and Hammerstein or whatever it is, people are on board with that stuff and they want to see more of it. So, it's I don't feel great about the future of art and culture right now, but at the same time, there are people, for instance, in Nashville, who are trying to make something new. My friend Stephanie DiMaggio just had her first play reading with a play featuring Patricia Heaton, Patty Heaton, Emmy Award-winning actress, and she's got producers sniffing around out there. Laura Osnes is out there as well, ex-Broadway star who also got purged really unfairly by the mandates, trying to build stuff out there as well. So there are artists of high caliber and high quality that are trying to create new things, but they're having a very hard time because there's just not a big ecosystem and a lot of support from sectors, from so-called culture warriors. You know what I mean? So that was a long rant.
Well, no. That was very, very necessary. I'll say that I'm fascinated with your profession because as a kid, I was interested in it, but I don't pursue it as a career. And likewise, as a kid, I was like an amateur magician, but of course, obviously I didn't pursue that as a profession. But today I've seen almost every single magician who's playing in Vegas. I'm fascinated. I love learning about it. And even into adulthood, by the way, I did some community theater and I just loved it. I just loved being on the stage. I loved doing it. And even into adulthood.
You have a very theatrical flair about you, I will say that.
Thank you.
You do.
Well, just minutes from where you spoke at the Mises Institute, I was in The Odd Couple that was put on by the Auburn Area Community Theater. But I had only one of the minor roles. I really wanted to be Felix or Oscar. But then I realized, it probably worked out for the best because I was rushing a book out at that time that turned out to be one of my best sellers. And I wouldn't have been able to balance that major role and that project at the same time. So I played Vinny, one of their friends. And it was a fun thing to do. But the downside to community theater was one of the other actors who played one of the minor characters forgot a different line every night. So it wasn't even like it's the same one. Every night it was a different line. And every night I had to improvise. Because if I didn't improvise, that thing was going to shut down to zero. No one was going to do anything. So I couldn't enjoy it that much because I knew I had to be like constantly on red alert. He's going to forget the line.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the exciting things I think about live theater is that you just don't know what's going to happen, and ideally the irony is that you rehearse and rehearse and rehearse, and you want to get to a place where, by the way, folks, my mouth is really dry, so if I swallow my words, that's kind of why I'm struggling here, but it's what I do enjoy is that I do get messages from people who tell me that, their local playhouses are actually packed all the time. And there is, I think, a big love for, some people just love being on stage, and it's not something you can really explain to anybody who doesn't really get it. And I think also I was thinking about this morning, which is that I think I saw this clip yesterday of Sir Larry, who was talking about the power of the theater. And I think I wish that America took its theater a bit more seriously, not just because it's they used to be really good at it, but unlike watching a film where you have a screen in the way and all these special effects kind of pulling you out of the story, the drama is happening right there in front of you, and the actors are sharing the molecules with you. I mean, Muhammad Ali said he went to go see James Earl Jones in The Great White Hope back in 1964, and he said that Jones was so on fire that the sweat his sweat was landing on Ali, and Ali was like totally in it, and you can't get that combination of like just visceral drama and aliveness anywhere else. And that goes for the performers too. There's a great relationship and a communion between the actor and the audience. And you see it kind of in live sports where, if the crowd is really hype, it feeds the athletes and vice versa. And the same thing happens with the actors as well. And I think part of it is that you're walking a tightrope, is that you don't really know what's going to happen. And I think, ironically, the better you are and the higher level that you're working at, the more terrifying it is, because on one hand, when you're at a master level, right, you really don't want to know where you're going to end up. You want to have a playful spontaneity back and forth. So really what I'm saying is that you probably already have the flair for play. I had a teacher who once called acting, it's seriously playful and playfully serious. And that's sort of the ideal place you want to be in, where, you have that sort of wonder and joy of kids playing tag or red light, green light, and it's like life or death. But also have a sort of depth and weight of if you're doing, Othello or something, and have that adult kind of maturity and craft and intention behind it. So the craft itself and the industry itself, it's a series of paradoxes and it doesn't make any sense. And, it's not anything like if you're a normal person, you don't belong anywhere near the industry. I call them civilians. Like there's a reason why, the weirdos are the ones that stay for life. All those crazy, theater kids in your high school, those are your future stars, directors, casting directors, agents, producers. So be nice to them. But that's sort of what it is, man. And I think in a way it goes back to what I was saying before, where I think artists need to understand that they are in the minority and they're weirdos, and they need to embrace that, and that, not everyone is like them, but that's also our gift, and we can cherish that. And so I guess, I say all of that to say that, Tom, you got to start brushing up on your Shakespeare and get into the game, because I think you'd actually do quite well. You're very comfortable in front of an audience. You have a very great facility with language, and I think you could probably put a dent in some Shakespeare.
Well, as we wrap up here, I will say that I have wanted to, again, just the community theater level is such a different, game, because you have people at all different skill levels and everybody participates, but I have thought about getting back into that. The only thing keeping me from it is I still have a couple kids at home, and the rehearsal schedule can be kind of grueling, particularly during the hours that I would normally see them. So at some point, I would absolutely not rule out at least, something near where I live, and because it is fun, and it's, look, when I'm in front of crowds, it's usually to give a speech. So I'm at ease in front of crowds, but this is way more fun. It's way more fun to be in a crowd for that reason.
I'm thinking, do you sing at all?
Well, I don't. I don't. But now I like it.
Okay.
Oh, well, by the way, now that you mentioned that, I want to mention a couple things. First, I want to plug your stuff, but I want to say we'll finalize the situation with the musicians, but I think you're still coming on my cruise. Is that right?
I hope so.
Okay.
We can talk about that off camera, but that's the plan.
Okay. All right. Because we'll have a tremendous time. We'll get to hear you, but I feel like I can't do karaoke in front of you. There's just no way. Like I just cannot allow you to hear that.
Like I said, everyone cries in singing class. But I'm like, dude, you would kill in Guys and Dolls. I could see you maybe. There's a few comedic roles I think in Shakespeare that you would one of the clowns in The Tempest, Stefano or Trinculo. You'd be hilarious in that. Like just your natural sensibility, and I think flair for the dramatic and comedic and sense of comedy as well would actually be quite funny. And I think you take to it like a duck to water.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Well, let's tell people about the Clifton Duncan podcast, which I recommend. You have a Substack. I'll link to that at tomwoods.com/2555, also in the description below the video. But I'll put your Twitter and stuff on there. Any link you'd like to say verbally to encourage people or whatever, go ahead.
Well, sure. I mean, if you want to check out, if you want to learn more about the Sowell play, you can check out www.sowellplay.com, which is set up thanks to Mr. Woods here, and see the crowdfunding campaign. I kind of feel guilty because, again, I need to hire an assistant really because I have all these backlogged episodes of my podcast. I mean, the most recent one was about the really bizarre discourse around Caitlin Clark, the WNBA superstar right now. But I have some more in the canon. I've got, I have my Substack. I haven't uploaded in a while because I have all these other pieces that I have in the canon. But I'm also like, I have to work on the Sowell piece as well. So I got, so lots of stuff going on. So there's not really anything new to report. All the standard links are there. I mean, I guess my Instagram is Clifton Duncan Online, but again, I've been so scatterbrained and focused on other things that I haven't really been uploading there in time. So if you really want to find my thoughts, I stick to Twitter. Most likely, I'm always talking trash on there, posting something crazy.
So I'll put all these links conveniently on the show notes page and beneath the video. So best of luck with this project. We can't wait to hear how it goes. Thanks so much for your time today.
Well, it's always a pleasure, Tom. Thank you.
And thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Make yourself and those you love less vulnerable to the regime, both mentally and physically. Get more forbidden information at tomsfreebooks.com and be sure to subscribe to the show wherever you listen. See you next time.
Like the sound of The Tom Woods Show? My audio production is provided by Podsworth Media. Check them out at podsworth.com.